Welcome to the edX Life podcast. Today, we are joined by Kavita Gupta Sabarwal, Director of Neve Schools, Bangalore, a leading voice in Indian education. Kavita's mission is to create schools that blend academic rigor, emotional intelligence, and global perspectives with deep rooted Indian values. From pioneering inquiry driven curricula and teacher empowerment to launching the celebrated Neve Literature Festival, her journey is inspiring a new generation of lifelong learners, change makers, and responsible citizens.
Hi, ma'am. Welcome to edX Live.
Thank you.
So, Neve Academy is now recognized as one of the top IB schools globally. As the founder and the director, how do you think your vision and philosophy has contributed to the global recognition? What makes Neve IB program different from most traditional or exam-driven IB schools?
Education is much more than exams, much more than grades. We recognize that it's about educating the whole child, and it's about educating the whole child for the whole world. That's how we look at learning at Neve. One of the most exceptional things that we do is we travel across the country. We do a lot of reading on knowledge, on issues which is outside of the curriculum. That's how we look at the whole child for the whole world. It's nice to know that we're doing okay with the academics as well, but it's important to never lose sight of that. The school is much larger than academics. Academics are an important component because they are how children enter, and assessments and grades are important. That's what creates an entrance for students to the next level. We can't lose sight of that. A child is not an alternate, but we recognize that either or thinking in education is broken and is problematic. You have to have a both and thinking in education, and that's what Neve is about.
The Neve Literature Festival has become a flagship event promoting literacy and love for reading. What simple things can parents do to make reading a family habit today?
I think what's important to recognize is, why do we do this? Why do we host the Neve Literature Festival? Often we propagate this thought process for children that education is something that's being done unto you. And when you ask children that who's the biggest, what is the best way that you learn, the kids will always often say that the best way we learn is from the teacher who's in the classroom. But the teacher is only one resource for learning. How do you get children to recognize that the world is changing so fast, and you cannot be, it's not only one way of learning. You also can't think that learning is something that needs to be done unto you. You need to be a volunteer on that journey. Otherwise, you're constantly looking at what is enough, right? And what is good enough. And then you want to stop there. Young children don't do that. Older children, as children grow older, they start to do that. They start to look at what is the learning that they can just stop at. Parents need to recognize that if they propagate that kind of thinking, parents and all adults need to recognize that we play a role in propagating that thinking, that the learning that we tell you is enough to succeed in the world. If we can make children instead learn the habits of being a lifelong learner through their own habits of curating reading, through their own habits of listening to podcasts and things like that that go way beyond just their pure academics, by identifying how they like to learn, by identifying what they like to learn, that is going to make them a lifelong learner, and that's important.
What makes experienced teachers are essential to quality education even in today's AI era?
Teachers are always going to be valuable. It's not a question of this era or that era. So the questions that are being asked now and the debates exist, the industry that is creating AI is or building AI wants the world to think that AI is thinking. But the fact is that AI is not thinking. AI essentially are the and the strongest developments in AI are the LLMs, the large language models. They are essentially sitting on top of language and data which exists in the world, and they are bringing that together faster than people who are not adequately informed can do. But they can't bring that together in a different way, right? They will bring it together in predetermined ways. That's what AI is doing right now. So that's outside of. So I think the role of a teacher in being able to help students realize what AI is capable of, what AI is not capable of, is one side of it. But an experienced teacher in the classroom is much more than that. An experienced teacher in the classroom is about having the heuristics, for example, of how do students learn best. Are students engaged in that learning? To see that conversation that happens and quickly. It's like communication between two individuals. The Turing test was actually what was defined so way back to say that can computers take the place of humans? And the argument was not there, and that still exists today. And that's because the capability of the interaction, the human interaction, and what that does to build things and to react to each other is not what a machine can do. You're not really communicating in preset ways. You are communicating in ways that the machine has known that this is the communication that has happened in the past, and therefore, so I think the role of a teacher is much larger than that. The role of a teacher is to be able to, and the role of a teacher is much larger than content. Is to see, are the children developing skills? Are the children having the right disposition to learning? Is this learning working for every child? To constantly differentiate learning is the big job of a teacher, and to make learning work for every child is the job of a teacher. Teachers are not deliverers of content. They are much more than that, right? And that job is not going out anywhere.
So, India's biggest minds still look abroad for higher studies. What will it take for Indian education to inspire the same confidence as Ivy League universities?
That's changing very fast. So it's all about where the economic growth is. Even today, if you look at where that economic growth is, where the innovation is, America today is so much ahead of the rest of the world, right? But we hear often and we read often how China is catching up with that. Development is the jobs of the future. Today, even today, are there in America. But that opportunity is going away. India is rising. With that, the change is happening pretty fast. If you look at the 1980s, the number of people from the IITs that were leaving to go abroad immediately after they finished their engineering were possibly 85%. But last year, or I think even the year before that, 83% of the IIT Delhi class stayed in India. Education is often about where you expect to be after doing your education and work wise, right? The place where you're going to be is where you're best off building your networks, and that realization is quite adequately there. Until recently, other than the IITs, and then for postgrad the IIMs and places like that, we did not have a very large range of educational options at a high quality. And that has started to change as well in the last 10 years in the country. So, if you put all of those factors together, recognizing where you need to build networks, recognizing the fact that there are greater options that are available in India. When you look at universities like Ashoka, Kriya, many of those universities, and they are not limiting themselves to a liberal arts education anymore. They're getting into that space of engineering, they're getting into the space of medicine, they're getting into the space of management and many other areas as well. So the kind of options that are available there are huge. And then the third aspect is Trump. And that's helping the case of India for sure, where our elite were thinking that it's a no-brainer to actually go to the US, say, or to other developed countries, and then continue on to have jobs there. That has shifted down. People worry about visas and for getting into colleges. That hasn't changed much on the ground actually, and not for the elite for sure. But what has changed well before Trump is jobs. Jobs are no longer available to our engineering graduates that go out of US universities and many other UK for that matter. So that is the third aspect that is changing that tide. And we are seeing that already. IIT Delhi class with 83% of them year before last staying in the country. We are already seeing that. And we are already seeing that also in the number of kids that are applying in India and still considering the US to some part, because the fact is creativity and innovation, they are so way ahead of the rest of the world. Those opportunities are still there, but that is shifting for sure.
So, with multiple education boards like ICSE, IJCSE, IB, Cambridge A Level, and other competing alongside state boards, how do you advise parents and students to choose the right curriculum for different aspirations?
We often tell people that it's not the child, it's the parent. It's important to know yourself as a parent and what kind of education. It's not about the curriculum, it's about your confidence. And there is something called an intergenerational contract. And that is, and they're formal intergenerational contracts, like social contracts and things like that. But they're also informal intergenerational, and that parent-child relationship is one of those. We always say that it's important that the child will often falter in particularly in the middle grades and things like that. The parent is the person who's holding the hand of the child at that time, and your hand can't falter as a parent. The child will falter. How can you ensure that your hand is holding steady in that moment? It's important for parents to know who they are and whether that education system their child is going to aligns with the value system that they hold. And yeah, parents must think about what's best for their child, but if they can't, if their value system is at contrast with what's happening in the education of the child, that's really hard. So it's very important to make sure as parents that the school that you're choosing, the board that you're choosing, is aligning clearly with the value system that you hold, so that your hand is not going to be faltering.
In that case, is technology truly helping children learn better?
No, absolutely not. And not yet, I would say. There are schools around the world, like Alpha School in the US is a very famous and a very expensive school. One of the most expensive. I think it costs $75,000 a year, to more than a Harvard education. That is very hugely doing AI based learning, diagnosing what kids do, and what kids know, and then finishing that learning in 2 hours, so that the children are then free to do other things. So there are models like that that exist in the world, but I believe that they leave out such a large part of what education really is. And I think on a real basis, AI is not helping children. And I'm constantly arguing with our children about it. When they go to AI and they pick up ideas from that, they are so limited. And there are so many, and many other children that will go looking for those ideas will pick up exactly that same idea. Technology is what this person. Sherry Turkle is a thinker about technology and neuroscience, and she talks about technology as a gateway drug. People like Daniel Kahneman has spoken about the fact that humans have a natural preference for reducing the workload and for being lazy. In that situation today, when you're looking at children, technology is actually becoming a gateway drug for children, for not adequately learning the habits of going deep, not picking up the kind of capability of having the cognitive load that's required in learning, not informing themselves adequately through reading and through language to build better thinking and better and more critical thinking, more creative thinking. I don't believe technology is helping our children, not yet.
So, in what ways is NEEV connecting students to real world opportunities?
We do it many ways. We do so as children grow older, we do what people would think of when you ask that question of connecting children to real world opportunities. They take up research projects, they do internships. There's a lot of that the children are doing, but the real world across the scale in the school is connected many different ways. We bring the world in significantly. We have a lot of guest speakers that come in to NEEV. We also bring in ideas. We bring in a lot of reading, say about technology or about politics. We bring that in. Our curriculum is built around many of those ideas. We have an overview of learning across the years from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, and that brings in a lot of the world. When we are not bringing the world into our teaching, we are also taking the children out to the real world constantly. We do a lot of field trips at NEEV. We do learning journeys. We travel across the country. We question, what does it mean to be an Indian? What does it mean to be me as a result? So there is a lot of that. We believe schools are like a brain, and I think it's like a, think of it as a whole neural structure, a brain, and but that brain is very porous, and there's movement of ideas inside and outside all the time. As a school, that's how we operate. We are constantly taking our children out to learning. We are constantly bringing in experts, bringing in readings, bringing in ideas in there. One of the reasons we do the Neil Literature Festival is also because of that, because the only habit in a world where lifelong learning is a requirement, the only habit that can feed that finally is reading. So there's a lot of that we bring in. And the reason we do the New Literature Festival is if reading is a hard habit that people fight, we want to make reading cool. And that's what we aim to do with the festival. At school, we see that a lot. Our children are readers. They like to access information through multiple different ways, but it's because of the way the curriculum is structured. The IB is also a curriculum that allows you to do that. And that's why we are as a continuum, we are an IB school. We don't look at ourselves as an international school. We look at ourselves as a very Indian school. There are many things that we do which sometimes surprise people. But the reason we do the IB curriculum is it's a curriculum that allows us to play. It's a curriculum that gives us the knowledge base, but it also gives us the possibility of building in these real world projects. For example, our grade 8 right now is working on a project on the Belandur Lake on understanding why the challenges exist. We are doing game based learning with them to bring in an understanding that there are multiple stakeholders. And while the problem may seem so simple, the moment you bring in all these multiple stakeholders, the problems with all differing agendas, it's not always possible to solve those problems. At the end of it, a bunch of the students ask the question that if it's not really about the lake, but it becomes about power, then how do you solve that problem? So many of these projects, at the same time, they are also preparing for a trip to Rajasthan, where they will also question development and say, how can development be felt by the people, not just as a GDP to the state because of the resources. So many of these questions get brought in through our education all the time. And that's how we bring the real world in, besides the internships and research opportunities and things like that, which come in maybe grade 9 onwards. IB is about following an inquiry cycle. And it always starts with a provocation. So if you look at the game that we had, that was a provocation. From the provocation come questions that the children ask. From the questions, we also know that the time that you learn best is when the questions are your own, right? Not when questions are exam questions. The time that you learn the best is when you pursue knowledge because you care about those questions, you care about the responses. So from the provocation come the questions, from the questions come research and you following through to build knowledge. From that research comes reflection to say that what have I learned? Did I answer my questions? And goes back into that cycle of learning all the time. So that's what the IB is about. The IB is about that inquiry cycle in many different ways. And that's always brought in through these many different ways, not just through real world learning, but even our traditional learning is done in that inquiry cycle way.
So, high conflict family situations can deeply affect students' well being and performance. Why is it crucial for educators to be trained in managing relationships with families? And what strategies have proven most effective in your work?
We don't believe it's essential to train teachers to do this because teachers are human beings and teachers are capable of conversation and communication. So it's the same thing. It's always a conversation. And I don't believe that any one stakeholder in education matters more than the others. So it's all the stakeholders in education matter a lot. You could possibly train educators to be more patient. You could probably train them to be listening and to be looking at what is to be solved, what is not to be solved. But the moment you look at a varied set of parents, everyone has a very different agenda. What are you going to train teachers to do with that agenda? If a parent wants to pursue their child as being gifted and talented, for example, right? Or look at the other end of the spectrum that a child has counseling requirements or has learning support requirements. The requirements of those two parents is going to be so different. A requirement of a working parent from homework versus a parent who is thinking more in that traditional mindset and wants that homework as a method of discipline is completely different. So what is the situation you have? A teacher is a very critical bridge in that relationship between home and school, and we always say that it's a golden triangle. And that golden triangle is not an isosceles triangle, it's not a right angle triangle, it's an equilateral triangle. All three at one apex of that triangle is the child, and the other two are a teacher and a parent, right? And that golden triangle has equal pressure on all sides and each one of its apexes. So recognizing that there are multiple things that work. Teachers also develop heuristics over a period of time, ways of thinking on solving problems. for parents also recognizing which problems need to be solved, which problems don't need to be solved. Parents, which parents need support, which parents need to, I think it's differentiating all of that. The Vijayanagar Empire had a very had a way of thinking about this. That when you go to Hampi, and we go on a grade 4 trip to Hampi with our children, you have the three animals in the architecture in that chariot. There are three animals that exist. There is the horse for speed, there is the elephant for stability, and there is and the tiger for courage. You have metaphors like that in so many other cultures and so many other kingdoms, past history. I think it's really about recognizing that everything matters together to make a whole child. What is the support that needs to happen between home and school? You can't train for this. This is just something that develops with experience. It develops with knowing children better, caring about children. So it's if we train teachers, we train them for that. We don't train them for how to talk to parents.
So you work across early childhood development, special education, international curriculum, and community impact. What foundational principle have stayed constant in your philosophy regardless of changing systems or trends?
Student at the center, child at the center. Um, the vision of Neve, the statement of our vision statement is reimagining excellence in education in a changing India. When you think of excellence in education, the word that comes to everyone's mind is assessment or grades, right? But that's not what excellence is about. Excellence is about putting that child at the center and thinking from there. So, a shared philosophy along that whole continuum that is Neve from early years to grade 12. We say that children come to us at 18 months and they leave us at 18 years. They come to us in diapers. They go out ready to make decisions about their life into the world. In that whole continuum, for us, putting the child at the center is what's most important, but not pandering to that child, educating that child, doing the right thing, building agency in that child, building competence in that child. Our continuum is about, in the early years, we are about exploration. So the child is exploring the world, understanding the world, developing theories about how that world operates and how they are expected to operate in that world. In the next one, which is our primary, it becomes about awareness. We build much more knowledge. Now we go away just from that child's world and we go further and further. In the next level after that, which is the middle grades, very critical, the teen years, we are about ability. It becomes very much about the skills of the child, the ability to make decisions and succeed and learn from that, but also fail and learn from that. And at the final level, which is high school, for us, for that child, it becomes about choices. It's when the children go through this continuum that children are able to make choices that they feel comfortable with. And we always say that the children don't regret the choices that they make. They will often regret the choices that we make for them. So, how can we build in them, in that child, from holding that child at the center? How can we build in that child the capability of making decisions, making choices? That's what's at the core of. Through that process of making decisions, making choices, children are also surfacing their values and beliefs all the time and shaping them. And they are saying that what are the decisions that align with my values and beliefs, what don't. So it's really educating that whole child for the whole world is about putting the child at the center first and working in an age appropriate way in that whole continuum.
So my final question is, how is assessments and exams in education system evolving?
A very good question. There is in the pandemic, so this whole thought process of assessment, grading, it's gone round over many years now. That and it's not just about should grades and assessments be there or not there, but also what kind of assessments should be there. That also is, and I think the world is balanced on that statement. Not that grades and assessments are not required, but what kind of assessment is required and what kind of grading is appropriate is where we are. We always say this in teaching, that if you are teaching something, don't teach something if it's not worth assessing. And if it is something that you're teaching, you must assess it. as well. So assessment is an ongoing process. How can you make that assessment more continuous? How can you make that assessment more age appropriate is the question. You can't assess a child who's in grade 1 with the same methodology as a child who's in grade 5 or a child who's in grade 8 for that matter, and certainly not assess a child who's in grade 7 with the same methodology that you would assess a child in grade 12. So I think in the pandemic, this came to the fore very significantly. Even in the UK, there's this website called Rethinking Assessment, and a lot of the world is converging on what is the best way to assess. A lot of universities globally started saying that they are not considering SAT scores, and that was hogwash. Now, many of the same universities, or some universities at least, are starting to say that no, they are considering those assessments very much. What other mechanism can be there for the universities to make a decision when they have a very large number of applicants, right? So, assessment is absolutely necessary. What kind of assessment we are doing is the question that should be asked. A lot of our Indian boards have also started shifting. The CBSE, the ICSE have started making that shift in assessment to more project-based learning, to bringing in more multiple choice questions and all of that. But I think we've got a long way to go on rethinking assessments because along with assessments also comes grading and correcting, and our whole system also has to get used to then doing new age assessments. But there's a lot of work that's going on in assessments, which is on the right path with the national education policy now.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode with Kavita Gupta Sabharwal. Her story proves that great education goes beyond the classroom. It shapes values, nurtures empathy, and builds communities for the future. Stay connected with edX Live for more conversations with India's education leaders who challenge norms and pave the way for tomorrow's change makers. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference.